Yeah.
Dan, back on the rub thing. I hunt a lot around here, and I'll have areas where I have 2 or 3 nice bucks on camera, and I'll scout the bedding areas and maybe find 1 or 2 big rubs. Is that pretty typical in a bigger setting like this?
It can be. I mean, a lot of the really biggest bucks I've shot, there's no rubbing at all around the bedding areas, which is probably not what you want to hear because it gets really hard to determine what's what then.
It's terrible.
But what I've noticed is areas that have multiple bucks of older age class, usually the bedding areas are rubbed more. So they're competing for the bedding. So I believe that bucks rubbing, scraping, and all that's a messaging thing. You know, they're letting other deer know, right? Especially rubbing. I think they rub around a bait or a food source or acorns or whatever. So other bucks know this is mine, or other deer, right? So it doesn't even have to be bucks. So they can be telling does, this is mine. Leave it alone. When they rub trails and rub lines, it seems to me like they're rubbing doe crossings and where the does are. And it seems like when they rub bedding areas, it has nothing to do with does at all. It has to do with, this is my area, this is my spot. And they don't have to do that if they have no competition.
One thing I noticed tracking them is they rub before they bed. A lot of people think they get up and they make these rubs, you know, whatever, while they're staging or whatever. A lot of times they'll come in and they'll make a run, and they'll make one rub before they bed, and it's usually on a tree that they've rubbed in the past. And I can't help but wonder is that like the guy in college hanging a sock on the door saying, hey, I'm here. You know what I mean, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm home. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know why they do it, but I've noticed that many times when they're going in before they bed down, they'll hit a tree that's you know common to them, and they'll rub that tree and then they'll go lay down.
Yeah. And on the psychology of that, I've been in a spot where you see a buck come in bed, you're seeing him bed, and another buck comes in, and it's kind of funny. They'll go in there. A couple of things can happen. Number one, the second buck can look at that situation and go way off to the side and bed down. The first buck will usually get up and stare him down. But sometimes the buck in the bed will get up and move off to the side, or keep moving to another bedding area, and this buck will go in and bed down. And sometimes, you know, one or the other buck is dominant, is what I'm saying, and they'll claim it. So I think that's where the marking stuff comes in there, in my mind, like what Todd's talking about, is they're marking it because multiple bucks use the same bedding areas. So for whatever reason's putting that buck there, whatever reason he wants to bed there, every buck is seeing that same picture. So whether it's the way the wind flows through there, whether it's the terrain or whatever, whether it's smelling the other bucks have bedded there. I've hunted bedding areas where you hunt it one day and you come back a couple days later and a whole different buck comes out of it. You know, it's not the same bucks. And we have bedding areas where I literally have one where I've killed not just me alone, but me and my friends and partners. I mean, Jerry's here somewhere. He shot one out of it last year. We probably shot 25 bucks out of that one bedding area. You know, one single little 1 acre little bedding spot. You know, and sometimes multiple bucks, but they'll be bedded like on opposite ends if it's towards rut. During outside of rut, sometimes bucks will get along, sometimes they won't. And then sometimes you get multiples in there. But it's a lot to do with competition. So going back to the original point, like Dave's farm, when we first started hunting there was a lot of big bucks in there. You know, in that area, because it was all private and stuff. Then they opened up that CWD hunt and kill them all, earn a buck with the does, and the neighbors started shooting every single doe they saw, started pounding the bucks because they had extra tags, started shooting little bucks when they never did in the past because now you got extra tags, and the population went way down. And the bedding area at Dave's farm, the main bedding area, was always tore up with rubs and rub lines coming into it from different directions. From the time the population dropped till present, those rubs all went away. There was no rubs in there at all. You couldn't tell that it was, you know, you see the scarring on the trees, and if there was a big buck there, every time it still come from that spot. Just now there isn't as many, right? So now you got one buck that comes through the farm here and there that you're hunting. Now the rubs are gone. So stuff like that is what's giving me that opinion that it's when it's a single deer, he doesn't need to put those rubs, you know? And I think the bedding areas you find that are the most tore up, where you see rubs everywhere in that bedding area and you're all excited, that's usually 2-year-olds. You know, really concentrate on that height. The 2-year-olds are the aggressives. They're the 18-year-old guy just getting into the bar scene, you know? He's going to stick his chest out at everybody.
I see that rubs increase as they get to that point where they think they're the man now.
Yeah.
And that's when they go nuts. So if you get in an area and you see it just tore to shreds, there's a really good chance it's like a nice 3-year-old, a good solid 3-year-old, probably maybe dominant in that area, that little area. And it's like, I'm the man now, you know, and he'll just go nuts. But then as those deer get older and older and older, that sign drops off a lot.
The one thing I would say that if you're hunting mature bucks in this area is when I'm going through these woods looking, the main thing I'm looking for, not scrapes, not tracks, is high rubs. Now, big tracks are huge, but there's nothing that, you know, you can mistake them. I have a lot of guys will see a track and say, isn't that big? And I'll be looking at it and say, it looks like a 2-year-old hit that hard, you know? And I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh, yeah.
But the rubs don't lie. If they're really high, that's a big buck. That's not to say a big buck can occasionally rub a little lower, but there's no 1.5 years reaching up like this, rubbing a tree up high. And you look for those high rubs, then you're in an area that's got them. And you can have a big buck and come through an area like this that lives 3 miles away during the rut. So what you're looking for is a series of that. You find a few rubs in here like all over the place in different terrains or near bedding. Now you got my attention, especially near bedding, because you can have middle of the night, you can rub a, you know, up on a hill here or something. But when you got a spot where the only reason a deer would go in there is to bed, there's no food there, there's no other reason, and there's giant rubs going in there or something, that would have my attention.
I see a lot of these big rubs randomly along the edge, you know, where the buck's going to want to travel. And I've hunted them, throw cameras on them, and I've yet to have any success on that lone. I mean, even one that gets you going, you know. And the only thing I can think of is that's part of his rut route, and he comes through there once a week, maybe once a season, who knows, and he hits that and he's on his way. If it isn't bedding related rubbing, you know, or a solid rub line going back where you think is his core area or whatever, I don't even look at those anymore. I mean, it's like, wow, that's really cool, you know, and it's nice to know that there's a good buck in the area, but that, when I say area, that could be 3 miles.
Yeah, even a food source, you don't know if he's eating at midnight.
Right.
Like an acorn flat or something. You don't know when he's doing it. But you know, you could throw a camera and find out. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it's going down into a bedding area, then you know for sure. You know, you know, swamp edges and stuff are typically what I'm talking about. Like you get a nasty cedar swamp, or say it's a clear cut that's like a tangle that they're not going to walk through, and there's a rub line going into it. Do you think he's going in there to, you know, spend a day or something? He's going in there, well, to spend a day, to sleep, right? So you got to kind of use your head and kind of think about it. And you can be wrong occasionally, but at least it starts putting you in that right direction of mindset, you know. But my point is if you spend time out here looking for bucks, I think you can cover a lot of ground looking for those rubs. And if you start finding those high rubs, start concentrating more on that area, and then look for those points going in. But the 1 or 2 random rubs just here and there, or on a rub line in the middle of a forest, I don't even care.
Unless it's a signpost. If it's a signpost rub, pay a lot of attention to it. You know, if it's one that's getting hit annually, every year, and it's, you know, this tree's this old, and you can see it's been rubbed for 6, 7, 8, 10 years or whatever.
I got that by me, and I put cameras on them and never got a picture till rut and only in the middle of the night.
Right. Don't hunt them only on the rut.
Yeah, but I'm saying I only get the pictures of the bucks at night.
Okay.
They are a little more nocturnal up by me.
Yeah.
But the ones going into bedding never seem to lie.
Yeah. I have found one. I can't take credit for finding it, but I know of one, and it's used daily, like in the daylight, and it's probably used by 6 different bucks a season. It's really interesting, really interesting. But it's on like a transition of like a tamarack and a little higher land.
Every now and then you get those great spots.
And I'm sure it was great at one time, because the way the clear cuts have aged now, it's a little bit different, but them deer still use that sucker. It's kind of unreal. Like, it's really weird, very strange. Neat spot though, really neat spot. I love leaving a camera on it every year just to see what shows up.
Yeah.
Danny, you ever hunted a particular buck and then see a total different buck that you'd like to shoot?
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time.
So you've seen the ones that I have. Okay. Probably 90% of them, I get a nice buck on camera, and I end up shooting a different buck that I didn't even know that was in the area.
Really?
The majority of the bucks that I shoot, I was hunting.
Well, it was a good problem,
Yeah, no
but I
kidding.
mean, you know, you're after that one particular one.
You know, I don't know what it is, but the
I'm
majority
not
of them that I'm hunting are the ones that
Yeah,
I
well,
kill.
you're a little bit higher caliber than I am.
Yeah, it's
Here, if
Well, I don't know
Pope,
about that. I would shoot
here,
a
if I see
nice.
a Pope and Young,
I would shoot a nice Pope and Young if it came in.
Yeah.
You know, even if I'm hunting one bigger, unless it's a really big one. But I'm usually not targeting a Pope and Young. I'm usually targeting something
Targeting something
big, and if
bigger.
something smaller comes in,
Yeah.
I'll like weigh it out whether or not I want to take it, what time of the year it is, and that kind of thing. But
You got to be careful with the rub thing here. I found a whole bunch of big rubs last year. I was all excited down in Jackson County. Put a camera on it, and it was an elk. I was so pissed.
I had that in Michigan. I didn't know Michigan had elk.
Yeah,
And then when we get up there, I had no idea there were elk up there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at these rubs. This guy's next to me, you're like, you're a big buck serial killer, you can't tell an elk rug? I'm like, there's no elk in Michigan. Yeah, there is.
we've got them here too. I mean, I see signs, I see tracks. They're here too.
It sounds like you're using rubs more for information than a hunting setup. Like a lot of guys see a bunch of rubs and decide that that's like the place they're gonna set. But I mean, we gave a bunch of examples of different rubs, like signposts in the middle of nowhere, a bunch of big groups. And it seems like every time you talk about it, you're gaining a certain information from it.
Right.
That is not necessarily like a lot of guys
Card
see
game,
sign
they're
and
showing you
they're
their
like,
cards.
right. A lot of guys see rubs and they're like, well, that's a bunch of rubs. There's got to be a deer living there. I got to set up on it. But you're
So a
weighing
bunch
the
of
difference.
my oldest bucks, including my very biggest buck. So let's take a look at my very biggest buck. That buck, I watched that buck bed in the same spot for 2 years. Kept bedding in this spot on a west wind, and I couldn't get at him because it's open where he was bedding. Bedding under this willow tree that kind of had a loop and it was like a little cave. And it was one of those scenarios where it's one bed where usually it's like a quarter acre of beds. This guy had one bed and it was worn to the ground. And I even picked up one of his sheds in the bed the year before. And I knew he was bedding there. I'd watch him come out of it. I could sit back from a distance and see it, but you couldn't get close. It was an old pasture, and then it was surrounded by crop fields. So it's real open. So he'd watch you when you come through, and the axis getting back there went right past his bed from like 100 yards. You can't see him in the bed, but you're going right past, you know he's sitting in there watching you. And there was not a rub or a scrape within 100 yards of that bed. Not a one. And I watched that buck there all the time. I killed him right in that bed. So if you're hunting rubs and scrapes, that's what you're going to get. Now there was rubs and scrapes there to tell you that buck was around, but not at that bed. They were more towards the does. He was the only buck out there in that caliber, or that age class.